This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
It's the Noon Report from Family Life, bringing a Christian worldview to what's happening in New York, Pennsylvania, across the country, and around the world. Weather with Kevin Williams, plus special features and reports with the Family Life News team. Now, here's what's happening.
No phone zone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the broadcast. It's back to school week in New York, and Governor Hochul is reminding parents to check their district's new smartphone policy. All the plans are available online at ny.gov/phone free. That's ny.gov/phone free. The governor says the distraction-free law will help improve education, adding that kids succeed when they're learning and growing, not clicking and scrolling. We'll talk more about the cell phone ban a little later in the broadcast. Call them the axis of upheaval. Russia's Vladimir Putin, China's Xi Jinping, and North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un all spent the morning together attending a massive military parade in Beijing. That's where we find reporter Anna Corwin.
With the sound of cannons firing across Tiananmen Square, soldiers from the People's Liberation Army goose-stepped in perfect unison. This was part of the largest military parade ever to be held in China, marking the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. But this spectacle was more than just commemorating the war dead. It was an opportunity for Xi to take center stage, flanked by his powerful allies and neighbors, Russia's President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
National security analyst Dr. Rebecca Grant says today's gathering marks the first time Putin, Xi, and Un have appeared together at the same time.
We have not seen the leaders of these three countries together in 66 years. So with Xi there in the middle with Putin and Kim Jong-un, it really sends a message that China is trying to assume the mantle of world leadership.
Grant says the Russia-China-North Korea alliance is a major menace to these United States. During today's parade, China's President Xi said his nation was, quote, unstoppable. Now to Washington, where victims of the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein are speaking out today on Capitol Hill. It's the latest chapter in what's turned into a contentious probe into the so-called Epstein files.
Several accusers of the late sex offender met with members of the House Oversight Committee, which is investigating the federal government's handling of the case. House Speaker Mike Johnson defended the approach.
You have the right people on it now, and we're on it. It's overdue.
Speaker Johnson also insisted President Trump, who was once a friend of Epstein's, also thinks it's overdue.
He also, just as we do, is insistent that we protect the innocent victims, and that's what this has been about.
Many of the president's strongest supporters have been demanding release of the Epstein files.
Linda Kenyon on Capitol Hill. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. will defend his controversial vaccine policies in testimony tomorrow before a Senate panel. Hundreds of scientists at the CDC have been let go since Kennedy took office. Former CDC Director Dr. Richard Besser.
These are people who work on cancer prevention, on heart disease prevention. These programs are all on life support, and that's very concerning.
There's a lot of confusion over who is eligible for the COVID shot after Kennedy announced that the vaccine would no longer be universally available. The U.S. military has carried out a lethal strike on a drug boat from Venezuela. Nearly a dozen Tren de Aragua gang members were killed in international waters in the southern Caribbean.
As long as those vessels are in the region and as long as the president's in the White House, he's made very clear he's not going to allow the United States to continue to be flooded with cocaine and fentanyl and other drugs coming from different places, this one from Venezuela.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio says U.S. warships were deployed to the Caribbean last month to crack down on cartel drug trafficking. Correspondent Charlie D'Agata.
This is the biggest military buildup they've had in that region for 3 decades. And whenever the Pentagon sends that much military hardware to an area, especially that area, you haven't sent in the defense. This is the offense.
President Trump says it's not a question of if, but when National Guard troops move into Chicago to crack down on crime.
Well, we're going in. I didn't say when we're going in. Look, I have an obligation. This isn't a political thing.
Beverly Hallberg with the Independent Women's Forum.
Instead of defunding the police, which we saw since 2020, wants to defend the police. He wants to defend communities, but he also has a jurisdictional issue here. Yes, he can do this in Washington, D.C., but if we care about federalism, separation of the federal government from state and local governments, we do want the mayors and governors to ask for that help. Hopefully they'll put politics aside and actually deal with this issue, but we're going to have to see how it unfolds.
Yesterday, a federal judge ruled the presence of National Guard troops in Los Angeles was unconstitutional. The White House says the presence of troops in the nation's capital has led to an almost 90% reduction in carjackings. Betsy Ross, eat your heart out. The Trump administration making plans to construct the largest American flag in U.S. history. It's set to tower atop the Empire State Building in time for the 250th anniversary of our country. That flag will be more than 770 feet wide and 1,500 feet long. Officials hope to unfurl it in the spring of next year. Still to come on the Noon Report, a midweek edition. Stefanik calls out Hochul. Lawmaker walks more than 100 miles. And fatal police chase in Western New York.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Williams, and I stay underway, but changes are on the way. I'll have the forecast in 10 minutes.
All right, Kevin, we'll check back then. Thank you. Checking the stories making news next, where you live, all across New York and Pennsylvania. New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik is calling for a federal investigation into Governor Hochul and state prison officials for their handling of the 3-week prison strike earlier this year. Hundreds of guards went on strike in February and March to protest working conditions at dozens of prisons statewide. Stefanik claims the Hochul administration violated the Federal Family and Medical Leave Act by forcing corrections officers back on the job. The Congresswoman accuses the governor of blacklisting and bullying prison guards during that 3-week job action. Lawmakers from Philadelphia are concerned that cuts to SEPTA could cripple transportation in the state's largest region. One politician decided to protest by skipping the bus and walking from Philadelphia to Harrisburg. It took Democrat Malcolm Kenyatta 5 days to complete that 105-mile walk.
Yes, I am tired. And yes, I'm in a little bit of pain. But I will tell you, the people of Pennsylvania are tired. And they're feeling a lot of pain right now because folks in this building refuse to do their job.
Republicans claim SEPTA already receives sufficient funding, and lawmakers need to focus instead on more pressing issues, like the 65-day late state budget. Transportation funding is one of the major issues holding up the spending plan. Pennsylvania politicians will not join the push to redraw congressional maps before next year's midterms. Senate Majority Leader Joe Pittman says mid-decade redistricting is a non-issue in the Commonwealth. New maps are usually drawn once every 10 years in accordance with census data, but several states are gerrymandering early to give Republicans or Democrats the advantage heading into next year's elections. Students across New York returning to the classroom this week as schools grapple with the first ever state-mandated smartphone ban. Here's reporter Natalie Migliori.
It's the first academic year since the district-free schools measure was signed into law, requiring bell-to-bell smartphone restrictions on K-12 school districts statewide, along with charter schools and BOCES programs. Governor Hochul is reminding parents to review their district's distraction-free policy, with policies for more than 1,000 schools published online. Schools are required to provide a way for parents to contact their children when necessary and grant medical-related exemptions. Hochul says kids succeed when they're learning and growing, not clicking and scrolling. I'm Natalie Migliori.
A U-Haul truck wound up in the water of the Erie Canal last night after being involved in a police chase in Western New York. Monroe County Sheriff's deputies received a report of 2 men taking items from a Walgreens in Brockport and placing them in the back of the truck. Cops tried to pull the vehicle over, but the driver refused to stop. That triggered a pursuit that ended when the driver drove the truck into the water in Orleans County. The driver tried to swim away but was caught. His passenger was found dead in the water.
This will be a significant investigation for us. As far as we're concerned, the driver is at fault for causing this death, and that's the way we're approaching the investigation.
Michael Fowler is the chief deputy with the Monroe County Sheriff's Office. A Pennsylvania dad is being credited for his quick action after he rescued a little boy from an elevated monorail track at Hershey Park. John Sampson says he was able to reach the terrified child by getting onto the roof of a nearby ice cream stand.
On the side of it, there's a fence. I climbed up on that, balanced on that, climbed up on the roof from there, and then it was a straight shot from there.
Sampson says the moment he got onto the tracks, he could see the child's relief written all over his face.
Instantly, and just super scared, and then just gripping me, so happy to be in somebody's arms.
That boy was about 100 feet off the ground when he was rescued. He is autistic. He was not harmed. Hershey Park says the child became separated from his parents. An Army football player at West Point helped rescue a man from a burning car in downstate New York over the long Labor Day weekend. That rescue story from reporter Michael Wallace.
Sophomore safety Larry Pickett Jr. was driving with his father and his sister Lauren just a few miles from West Point when they spotted a car that had crashed into a utility pole.
Come on, get him out!
Lauren recorded on her phone as her father and brother dodged down power lines to pull the driver to safety.
We just know your joint is on fire, and the airbag kept you, and Jesus kept you, man.
Oh, yeah. Pickett Jr. was glad they could help.
Michael Wallace reporting from West Point. From the wrestling mat to the driver's seat, one Western Pennsylvania teenager just got the surprise of her life. Family Life's Brian Query.
18-year-old Tamara Humphreys, or the Firefly as she's known by, is one of the top female collegiate wrestlers to come out of Western Pennsylvania in years. Tamara is starting her freshman season at the University of Pittsburgh at Johnstown on a full-ride scholarship, but she still needed a way to get to class and back home. That's when NBA legend Shaquille O'Neal stepped in. After connecting with Tamara on social media, he surprised her with a brand new SUV and some words of encouragement, telling her to keep her grades up and to, quote, stay away from the boys. Humphreys says she's determined to chase her Olympic dreams, and now, thanks to Shaq, she has a new set of wheels to help her get there. Brian Query, Family Life News.
What a great story. Thank you, Brian. Buffalo Bills fans can now bring MVP quarterback Josh Allen home with them in cereal box form. Wegmans is announcing the launch of Josh Allen MVP Puffs, which will be available for a limited time at all Wegmans stores. A portion of the cereal sales will go to help Oshai Children's Hospital in Buffalo. Allen and the Bills begin their regular season this Sunday night at home against the Baltimore Ravens. More sports next. It's the 2-minute drill on the Family Life Noon Report.
Good afternoon, I'm Randy Snavely. Bob, it seems like the home run balls have been flying out at a record pace lately. In Houston, the Bronx Bombers were at it again. Jazz Chisholm Jr. hit 2 of them. Trent Grisham smacked it granny. The Yankees easily took down Houston 7-1. Max Fried tossed 7 innings to pick up his 15th win of the season. In Pittsburgh, the Pirates held on to beat the Dodgers 9-7. In the game, Shohei Ohtani hit his 46th long ball of the season, and in a process, he set a Dodgers record. He became the fastest Dodger to reach 100 home runs, doing it in only his 294th game. It was also the hardest hit ball of his career, coming off the bat at 120 miles an hour. Glad nobody got in the way of that one. The New York Mets were in Detroit, and the Tigers wished the Amazons hadn't shown up. Pete Alonso slugged a pair of home runs. Luis Torrens and Juan Soto also went deep as the Mets cruised to a 12-5 victory. The Blue Jays remained 2.5 games ahead of the Yankees as Toronto outlasted the Reds in Cincy 12-9. George Springer hit 2 home runs in the game for Toronto. Andrew Benintendi also went deep twice to lead the White Sox to a big 12-3 win over the Twins. Tampa Bay, the Angels, Nats, Cubs, Giants, Red Sox, Cardinals, D-backs, and Orioles also won their respective games. At the U.S. Open Tennis Championships in Flushing Meadows, fourth-seeded American Taylor Fritz fell to number 7 Novak Djokovic in 4 sets. But on the women's side, fourth-seeded Jessica Pegula won in straight sets to move into the semifinals. Pegula has yet to drop a set in this tournament. That is a look at sports.
All right, thank you very much, Randy. And still to come on the Noon Report, new axis of upheaval. Epstein victims on Capitol Hill and the search for a church that's right for you.
Welcome to Breakpoint, a daily look at an ever-changing culture through the lens of unchanging truth. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet. Back in April, the Bible Society of the UK issued a report describing what they called a quiet revival that was sweeping across England and Wales. Quote, "Church decline in England and Wales has not only stopped," the subheading read, "but the church is growing as Gen Z leads an exciting turnaround in church attendance." End quote. Though the report did receive its fair share of critics, it also launched an essential conversation. And last Sunday, James Marriott joined that conversation in a large article in the UK publication The Times, which chronicled what he called a comeback for Christianity. And what made his article, entitled Full Fat Faith, the Young Christian Converts Filling Our Churches, even more interesting is that Marriott describes himself as a dry and desiccated materialist. At least part of the renewal, Marriott thinks, is due to a growing disenchantment the young are having with atheism. After all, during the peak of the new atheism, he wrote, quote, "It was widely held that the world was soaring ineluctably along an arc of enlightened progress. We were all destined to become richer, more democratic, more just, more rational, more secular. But those optimistic beliefs have been sorely tested in difficult recent years. Anyone tempted to simply dismiss the idea that religion could ever revive may not grasp how dramatically the cultural and economic landscape inhabited by young people has changed." End quote. Instead of the utopia that secularism long promised the world, the post-9/11 realities included things like economic disruption, COVID, wokeness, thought police. As a result, many young people are now rebelling toward a more traditional form of the Christian faith. As Marriott put it, quote, "If you're young, the establishment is obviously secular. Nowadays, it's precisely Christianity's marginal status that lends it glamour and charisma, comparable perhaps to the appeal of exotic-seeming Eastern religions back in the 1960s, end quote. And last week, I spoke about this so-called quiet revival in the UK with podcaster, author, and apologist Justin Brierley. Brierley was among the first to identify what he called the surprising rebirth of belief in God. For example, according to a recent poll of non-Christian Gen Z students, 75% said they'd consider attending church if they were invited. That's a huge increase from the past. And though church attendance is always typically higher on Easter, this past Resurrection Sunday broke records all across Europe, especially in France. And according to one poll, the number of 16 to 24-year-olds in the UK that are attending church at least once a month jumped from just 4% in 2018 to 16% in 2024. Now, there's still a whole lot to learn about this phenomenon and what is causing it, and it remains to be seen just how sticky all this newfound faith will be for these young people that have been raised in such a highly secular environment. However, it is absolutely fascinating that just a decade ago, we were all talking about the rise of the nones, the N-O-N-Es, the religiously unaffiliated, who often claimed that the church had let them down. But today, we're talking about the rise of the young religious, and they're talking about how they were let down by secularism. Secularism as a worldview is simply not big enough for the God-shaped hole that's in the human heart. And as more and more young people realize this, the church has an incredible opportunity to help them find the one who can fill the God-shaped hole in their hearts. You can hear my entire conversation with Justin Brierley about this so-called quiet revival on a special bonus episode of the Breakpoint Podcast. And you can find the Breakpoint Podcast wherever you download your podcast. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet with Breakpoint.
Thank you, John. Outside next, Kevin Williams.
Here is your family life weather forecast for this afternoon. Pleasantly warm, ample sunshine. High temperatures 70s and low 80s. The moon shines tonight. We drop to around 60. Tomorrow, clouds up. Showers will arrive with a few thunderstorms from west to east. High temps 70s and low 80s. Friday, clouds, sun, a spot shower. High temps in the 70s. And again, quite a bit cooler for the upcoming weekend.
All right, Kevin, thank you very much. This is the Noon Report on Family Life. I'm your host, Bob Price. And here's what's happening Wednesday, the third day of September. A new axis of upheaval may be forming on the other side of the world. A powerful image of solidarity today in Beijing, China, where President Xi Jinping was flanked by Russia's Vladimir Putin and North Korean strongman Kim Jong-un. The three of them took in a massive military parade.
Kim Jong-un was put front and center of this morning's event, walking through Tiananmen Square alongside President Xi and President Putin. The three of them sat together, talking during the parade. It is striking to see the North Korean leader, who's long been isolated and even poked fun at, be elevated alongside these two powerful world players.
The BBC's Gene McKenzie. The House Oversight Committee's released more than 33,000 pages of Justice Department documents linked to Jeffrey Epstein. Republican Chairman James Comer.
We're sincere about this. This was a 2.5-hour discussion. It was as bipartisan as anything I've seen in the 9 years I've been here.
Some of Epstein's victims spoke to the press today on Capitol Hill. The accused sex trafficker killed himself in jail in August of 2019. President Trump says it's not a matter of if, but when he sends National Guard troops into Chicago to protect America's third largest city from crime. Over 50 people were wounded. 8 were killed during the Labor Day weekend by gun violence in the Windy City. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker says while he welcomes federal law enforcement officers like ATF and the FBI, he does not want to see soldiers combating crime.
I refuse to play a reality game show with Donald Trump again. What I want are the federal dollars that have been promised to Illinois and Chicago for violence prevention programs that have proven to work.
The White House says the presence of National Guard troops in Washington, D.C. has resulted in an almost 90% reduction in carjackings. A U.S. military airstrike has killed nearly a dozen Tren de Aragua narco-terrorists in international waters in the southern Caribbean. They were trying to smuggle drugs into the U.S. from Venezuela.
We have a lot of drugs pouring into our country. A lot of things are coming out of Venezuela, so we took it out.
The strike comes as the largest U.S. military buildup in 30 years is currently underway in the southern Caribbean. The president says he is taking the legal fight over tariffs to the highest court in the country. Here's reporter Rory O'Neill.
A lower court says most of the tariffs imposed by the Trump administration are illegal, but the president isn't ready to accept that decision. The president telling reporters they will ask for an expedited hearing with the U.S. Supreme Court as early as possible. Trump blamed the recent court ruling against him on, quote, crazy liberal judges. He again insisted the tariffs are needed to create a level playing field with America's trading partners. I'm Rory O'Neill.
Vice President J.D. Vance is in Minneapolis today. He and his wife Usha are meeting with families impacted by last week's Catholic school shooting. 2 children ages 8 and 10 were killed. The gunman, a former student at the school, shot himself. OpenAI says it will install new safety guardrails after accusations that its ChatGPT AI has encouraged suicide, murder, and self-harm. Michael Kastner files this report.
The company is facing lawsuits, including one from the parents of a 16-year-old boy that committed suicide after long talks with ChatGPT. The company says that by the end of the year, it will be harder for teens to use this service without more direct parental oversight. It's also trying to make it easier for users to be directed to emergency services that help as the bot learns to better recognize signs of distress. I'm Michael Kastner.
A federal judge says Google must hand over its search results and some data to rival companies, but does not need to break itself up by selling its Chrome web browser. This ruling is a setback for the federal government, which is trying to rein in Google.
For Google, this ruling effectively allows the company to continue running its business the way it has, though it can't set exclusivity agreements anymore, and it'll have to share more data publicly.
Tech analyst Ian Shure, there's been an arrest in Houston in the shooting death of a boy who was pulling a prank. Correspondent Karen Y.
42-year-old Gonzalo Leon Jr. was arrested and charged with the murder of 11-year-old Julian Guzman. Police say the suspect, an Army veteran, opened fire on two boys, 10 and 11-year-old cousins, knocking and ringing doorbells late Saturday night. After Guzman knocked on Leon's front door, police say Leon shot the boy in the back and killed him.
That's reporter Karen Y. in Houston. You're listening to the Noon Report for Wednesday on Family Life.
Looking for a church can feel awkward, intimidating, and sometimes, honestly, very lonely. Welcome to Inside Out on Family Life. I'm Martha Manikas Foster, and my guest is writer and speaker Michelle Morin. One of her articles was titled, "The Search for a Church That Feels Like Home." Michelle, I don't know anyone who feels comfortable church shopping. So why do you think it's so hard? And what would you say you learned in the process of searching?
Well, I think it's hard because it takes us outside our comfort zone. If something has happened to jostle us and make us take the risk of moving somewhere else where we don't know the routine, we don't know how things are done. And one thing that I think I learned is that I and all of us are really perpetually looking to receive horizontally things that are only available to us vertically. You know, we want to get our needs met. We want fulfilling worship. We want all these things, and we need to look to God for those things rather than expecting a quote-unquote perfect church to just swoop in and make us happy, and that I can't wait for someone else to make me feel welcome. I have to do a little bit of the work myself.
So something jostled us to be in the situation to begin with, right? And that comes with us as we go into another situation where we're feeling insecure and we are looking for other people to somehow be the perfect recipients for us.
Right,
of us. Yes.
Right. We're already walking with a limp because of whatever happened to make us decide that even if it's just that we've moved geographically, we're still a little bit unsettled. And so it's natural that we'd want comfort, and we look for it in all the wrong places, I'm afraid.
Now, Michelle, how would you counsel people who are, in fact, in that process of looking for a church?
Well, one thing that I wish we had done is just dialed back the perfectometer a little bit. we were looking for the perfect church. And what I wish we had done, and we didn't do this, but I wish we had made a list of non-negotiables, maybe even in order. Like every family, every couple has things that are more important. And just make a list of them and put them in order, and then make peace with the fact that you're going into an imperfect situation. And the truth is that all we have available to attend church and sit in pews is imperfect, sinful people. There's nothing else on this planet to go to church other than sinners, and we're part of that problem ourselves, so we should just allow the sandpaper of that imperfection to reform us and to remake us, and let grace lubricate those relational gears, because the reason that we're lovely is because God loves us. It's not a merit-based system at all. We come to God and He accepts us the way we are, and our right response to that is to pass that understanding along to others. And after 20 plus years in the same church, I will say that church is hard, and yet it's commanded of us that we be part of that body. It's how we walk out our belovedness in the body of Christ, and how we honor one another and make allowances for the imperfections that are there in all of us. I would certainly think that I was a much more patient and loving person if I didn't have to deal with people who say things that are absolutely incomprehensible to me. You know, there are some people that are going to be in a church situation that every time they open their mouth, you sin because you're thinking judgmental thoughts about them. And we need to discover that about ourselves so that we can understand that forgiveness and repentance are part of the following life.
Wow. How do you think your experience has formed you as someone who is right alongside people who are visiting you now? You are the person who is the receiver of visitors.
And I want to be welcoming. And one word that is so important to me in my Christian life is hospitality. Mm-hmm. So I don't think we have to be at our own dining room table to exercise hospitality. There's a pew hospitality that we need to be aware of as believers, and to just be the welcome. And I think there's a reason why we throw that term home church around so much, because there's room for everybody. There should be room for everybody. And the home is the context for our gifting. It's the context for making mistakes. And I feel like I've been just very graciously taken in by my home church. I've lugged casseroles and I've received casseroles, and it's a mutuality. And some of the longing that we experience on this planet is almost a homesickness. I think the gospel is best understood in terms of that longing for home, and church is like practice for someday when we're with the Lord and all of our longings are fulfilled. Well, that's certainly not going to happen on this planet, and so we experience a tiny little taste of that in our home church, and I want to be that welcoming person.
And that is speaker and author Michelle Morin on this week's edition of Inside Out with Martha Menekes Foster. You're listening to the Noon Report on Family Life.
Good afternoon. Here is your Family Life regional weather forecast. High pressure helping deliver a nice day today, but changes are on the way, resulting from a cold front now crossing the upper Great Lakes. That front's going to bring some snow over the next 36 hours to areas north of Lake Superior. No concern here, but it is going to pop some showers and thunderstorms tomorrow night and bring some very cool air as we head toward the weekend. But for this afternoon, pleasantly warm, ample sunshine. High temperatures 70s and low 80s. The moon shines tonight. We drop to around 60. Tomorrow, clouds up. Showers will arrive with a few thunderstorms from west to east. High temps 70s and low 80s. Friday, clouds, sun, a spot shower, high temps in the 70s, and again, quite a bit cooler for the upcoming weekend.
All right, thanks for all the work at the Weather Center, Kevin. And finally at noon, Guinness World Records celebrating its 70th anniversary by offering unclaimed titles and an online quiz to match regular folks with potential records. Options include the most eggs stacked in a minute or farthest distance on a bottle flip. There's also a list of 70 unclaimed titles like fastest burrito maker or most anchovies eaten in a minute. And that's our world. The world we live in. Wednesday, the 3rd day of September. I'm Bob Price. Family Life News.
You've been listening to the Noon Report, heard weekdays on Family Life. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.